Hey Adventures, so today is going to be a little bit of a different video, and that is basically my favorite sci-fi books that I've read so far. While I have 10 books on this list, it's not necessarily a top 10 list. So last year, it's either December or January, something like that, this January, so it would be this year's January, or last year's December. I did a video titled something, I'll have it linked up here, but it's titled something along the lines of my adventure through Arthurian Lit so far, or something like that. And that's kind of what this video is going to be. It's not going to be every Arthurian literature book that I've read, or every sci-fi book that I've read, but it's going to be some of the ones that have really stood out to me so far. There are several others that I've read and just decided to leave off this list for whatever reason, and I probably won't talk much about those, even though some of them were read really recently. But it's a video that I've kind of really wanted to do because it's kind of a good place for me to check in with where I'm at in science fiction, being really a new science fiction reader. I haven't really read a whole lot of science fiction up until this year. And so I'm excited to kind of start my journey through science fiction. I largely credit that to David Wiley and to Jonathan with Words in Time, because both of them, David Wiley, he kind of, when he first started and when I first started watching him, he was all about fantasy and historical fantasy and history and stuff like that. That was where he really focused. And then since then, he's basically gone to as much or more science fiction than anything else. And so seeing his transition and seeing him say basically, I don't really want to read anything other than science fiction, that really intrigued me. And then watching Jonathan from Words in Time, his whole channel is science fiction, and I really enjoy his channel and seeing his love for it and his ability to talk about it. I guess I should incorporate Liam's Lyceum into this as well, because he's been another one of those who he talks a lot with Jonathan. It's kind of those three, for some reason all three of them together have made me want to read more science fiction than I ever have in the past. And I guess I should start with saying this as well, which I think most of you have probably heard at one point or another. But for a long time, I didn't think I liked science fiction. I thought it was a genre that it wasn't for me. And as I've continued reading and watching more science fiction, I'm seeing and learning that it's not the science fiction that I don't like. It's not that genre. It's specifically Star Trek. I can't get into Star Trek. It's so boring. It has nothing of interest to me. That's my personal opinion. If you guys like it, that's great, but it doesn't work for me. And so I've been going through this arc really over the past 3 years, 2.5 years now that I've been doing this channel, I guess, that has taken me from I don't like science fiction to, you know what, I really do like science fiction. And so kind of the journey that I've gone through with these books, and these are the books that have stood out to me the most in this journey so far. So now that that big long intro is out of the way, we'll get into the actual books that I'm talking about. So these are in no particular order. These are just the order that I thought of them in. And so I wrote them down in this list of 10 books or series, some of them, that I have really appreciated some aspect of what they're doing. And the first one I have on this list is the Calculated series by Nova McBee, specifically Activated, which is book 3 in the series. So the first book, and I talked about this in my review of Activated several months ago, that when I read this book, I read Calculated, the first book in the series, and I didn't love the story, but I was very intrigued by the world. I loved the world that was being set up with it, with the prodigies and with these characters who have basically superpowers but aren't superpowers, and how that all ties in and how that works. I've really loved. And that was enough to keep me interested in wanting to read more. So then I read Simulated, book 2 in the series, and thought very much the same thing. I enjoyed it a little bit more, but the aspects that I really enjoyed about Calculated weren't as prominent, but they incorporated new aspects, and so it was kind of a weird mix that Simulated was a little bit, I enjoyed it more than Calculated, but not loved it. And then I read Activated, which is book 3, and I loved Activated. So that's the first book or series on my list, Activated, and the whole Calculated series is really that first one that I want to talk about. And then the next one I have is Recorder by Kathy McCrum. This is a book that I got for Christmas last Christmas. And I read it, I wanted it because this cover is gorgeous. Like, for some reason, the cover really attracted me, really drew me in. I really wish I had review for Recorder on the channel, but I don't have one. I will probably have to do one at some point in time. I'll see how I can do one. But I really wanted to have, or I read this book loving the cover, already knowing that the cover was intriguing to me, which I know you shouldn't judge a book by a cover and everything like that, but we do it anyways. And this cover works. It's amazing. And then I read the book and I really loved the book. I really loved it was a little bit more YA the writing style was a little bit more YA than I particularly love, but the story being told and the way it was being told and the world that was being set up was all really, really good and really cool, and just the exploration of the character of the main character really resonated with me and really worked as a storytelling device, and I just really ended up enjoying Recorder. So let's continue on. That was book 2. The third book was Dune by Frank Herbert. So I read Dune about this time last year, a little bit further. I think it was about September of last year, in preparation for the movie, yes. But I read the book because it's a book that's been on my list since we started the channel as one that I wanted to read. And so I listened to the audiobook, what's it called? I don't know, whatever the word is for audiobooks that have a cast and sound effects and everything added into them to help tell the story better. So I listened to that audiobook for Dune, and I really, really enjoyed it. I really loved the characters, the world that was being set up. Characters aren't the most important to this first book, at least. I haven't continued on with the series yet, but the characters, I did like what I was seeing from them. I liked the kind of magic or science that was tied together, and I know Dune is considered by a lot of people to be a science fantasy. Maybe it's just me not seeing that really yet, or maybe that isn't incorporated in book 1 so much as it is into the later books. But what I saw, this very much science fiction, and I really enjoyed what I was reading with it. Very thoughtful, very, you have to take a lot of time to think about what you're reading. You can't just read the story and expect to get everything out of it, because it's a deep book. There's a lot of philosophizing, I guess, that goes into this book. And while I enjoy that, and I like to think about stories, and I like to analyze how they work. And so seeing that in this book worked really well, in my opinion. I'm gonna keep going because I don't want this video to get terribly long. So the next book I have on my list is Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. I just recently, by the time you're seeing this video, I think I'll have just recently put up a review for it, so I'll have that linked. If I haven't put it up yet, that you won't have to see anything about this. Anyway, so I read Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer, which was a very atmospheric read for me. It was one that I went into not knowing what to expect. The only thing I knew was that it sounded interesting, it had fairly mixed reviews, and that I didn't want the ending to end up being resolved as aliens, which sometimes science fiction books are. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Anyways, so I went into this book not knowing what to expect from it, and I was confused. It had an unsatisfying ending. And it was exactly what I was looking for. It was an atmospheric read that had me confused the entire time, but also had me interested, kept my interest the entire time, and left us off at a place where it was just unsatisfying enough that you either have to read the next series or you can just give up on the series and be like, you know what, I quit. For me, I kind of wish that there weren't sequels to the book, because because I feel like that unsatisfying ending would be even more impactful as an unsatisfying ending if there weren't sequels to it. And so the whole experience that I had of reading this book, where it's very atmospheric, where I was confused, everything about it tied together and made me love the book so much. So that's, I guess, what is that, book 4 on my list? I'll keep going from there. I'm really just talking about some of the books that I've read that have left an impression on me. The next one I have is War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. This is a book that I read in high school, and I haven't reread it yet. I really, really want to, but I was absolutely blown away with this story when I read it. It was so good, it was so horrifying in a way that I feel only science fiction can capture in many times. It's not horror, it's, I guess, maybe terror, but whatever the case, it's the way that this story was told and portrayed. I absolutely loved it. I found this book at the secondhand bookstore or whatever, used bookstore, for $3, super cheap, but I love the cover. You can, I guess on the back you can see it a little bit better. You can see the design of the alien monster thingy on the back here. And for some reason that image is exactly what I imagined in my mind, or very close to it. I'll include a picture here. But the image that I had the entire time I was reading this was from Justice League the Animated Series. The first, I believe it's the first arc, 3-episode arc in the series, with Martian Manhunter first joining the Justice League, with the Justice League first being formed, and these, technically it's the White Martians, that's not what they're called in that show, but that's basically who they are from the comics. And that whole, the big 3-legged monsters, and that is what this book reminded me of. That's the image that I had in my head the entire time, and it worked so well. It helped me to imagine what was going on in this world, and I don't know, I really loved War of the Worlds, and I really want to reread it sometime pretty soon. So the next one I've got is The Giver and Gathering Blue. So I've read the first 3 books of The Giver Quartet by Lois Lowry, which is The Giver, Gathering Blue, and Messenger. And The Giver and Gathering Blue are more on The Giver specifically is very science fiction. Like it feels like science fiction to you. It's a dystopian science fiction future. Gathering Blue is still enough of that you can be like, okay, this is still science fiction, dystopian science fiction, that's fine. Messenger, it starts to get into dystopian fantasy a little bit, and which makes you recontextualize the 2 books coming before it, but that's alright. The first 2, Giver and Gathering Blue, I absolutely love both of those stories. Messenger I wasn't as big of a fan of, but Gathering Blue, just the story in that, so good. Absolutely loved Gathering Blue, but The Giver is one that I read probably in early high school, and I absolutely loved it. I mean, it's kind of a shocking story, kind of a, whoa, what is going on? But the whole thing with The Giver and the Receiver, what are they called? I want to say it's the Receiver. The whole thing with The Giver and the Receiver and how that all ties together and works, and then the whole thing with seeing colors for the first time, hearing music for the first time, learning all these different aspects for the first time, seeing part of the world that you never knew existed, and the pain that comes with knowledge and memory, but also the life that comes with that as well, and how that all ties in and tells this story is just so good. So absolutely, the Giver and Gathering Blue are hugely important to my science fiction journey. The next one I have is The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. This whole trilogy, the whole trilogy really, but the story that's being told, it's another dystopian science fiction future that is horrifying. Like, it would suck to live in this world. And even though that's the case, the stories are so good. And yeah, they're young adult, they're romance in many ways. Not really, they're not marketed as a romance, but they very much have a romance that's central to the plot. But that's, if you can look past that and just look at the story being told, look at the world being developed, the horrors of the world, the war, the fact that war is a thing, and how it all plays into this, and then the Hunger Games themselves and that, including the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes actually, which is a prequel. I quite enjoyed the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Again, it had another one of those unsatisfying endings that I really liked. Sometimes I really like unsatisfying endings, and the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes was one of those times. So this one, Hunger Games, the main trilogy, is another series that worked really well for me. Yeah, it's young adult, but so on Overly Average Ben's Discord server, his and Grace Dion's Discord server, they recently did a Hunger Games buddy read or something like that. And just reading people's experience for the first time reading those books, or rereading them for a time, and you know, there's a little bit of a stigma against this series, but seeing all their experience with them and be like, you know, that's actually a really good series. That's how I feel. Like, it has its problems, absolutely, but the series is really good. And so Hunger Games is another one that's left a really big impact on me. And where am I at? The next one I have is A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L'Engle. I didn't include the second book in this series, which is A Wind in the Door, I believe, because it leans more into fantasy a little bit. But the first one, A Wrinkle in Time. So this is one that in my childhood sometime we watched the old, I think the movie was released in 2000 or 2002, something like that, the old Wrinkle in Time movie, and that movie is so ingrained in my childhood mind that I think about it all quite a bit still. And then I read the book last, I guess it was 2 years ago, 2020, when we first started the channel. I read the first book, A Wrinkle in Time, in the series, and I loved it. It was so good. It was there was some concepts and some themes that were just so deep and so philosophical, but all at the same time presented in a way that a child could grasp. Maybe not, but they might be able to. And just the way that it was done and me looking at it as an adult, it worked really well. But this story, A Wrinkle in Time, is one that I have had in my mind for so long now that it's just left such a huge impression on, and I very much enjoyed A Wrinkle in Time. House of Suns by Alistair Reynolds. So this is one that Jonathan Pornsen and Liam Lyceum both, they kind of got me to read it, which I'm glad about because I really enjoyed it. But it was one that I still fairly early in my science fiction journey. It was this year that I read it, but it was March or April or something like that when I read it. And I really didn't know what to expect from it or what to think of it or anything like that, but I read it and I quite enjoyed it. Again, some deep topics, very, very much science fiction topics, but also some good character work in it, and just the exploration of space and the whole, this is millions of years in the future, and how society has changed, how the whole world has changed, but then some of the flashbacks to a more near future, I guess. It's still a long ways off, but how that ties into this long future away and how everything works together. It was just a very interesting read for me, and very kind of a good step out from the science fiction that I had been reading, which was like calculated, which was like record, some things that weren't so grand. So it was that one, probably my least favorite of these 10 that I have on this list, but that's not because it's bad. That's because these other ones are just, they worked so well for me. But House of Suns I quite enjoyed, and I do have a review for that should be linked. And then the last book that I have on this list is Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton. So this is one that I just recently finished. This is one that Kate selected for me to read for the third quarter of the year 2022. And so I read this one, really enjoyed it. I listened to the audiobook because I didn't think I would have time to physically read it, and I was probably right. I probably wouldn't have had time to physically read it. But I listened to the audiobook for it, and it was so good. I love the movie. I have enjoyed all the Jurassic Park movies that I have watched. I haven't watched Dominion yet, and I've heard mixed things about that, but whatever. So far, I've enjoyed them all. The Jurassic World movies are not as good. I still enjoy them because it's dinosaurs, okay? I like dinosaurs. But I read so I read this one, and I absolutely loved it. There's a lot of similarities to the movie, a little bit of rearranging between movie 1 and movie 2, but there's a lot of similarities, and the movies are a great adaptation, but they're very different still. There's so much in this book, description-wise, atmosphere-wise, science-wise. Like, you learn so much about the world in this one book in a way that the movies can't really go into in a 2-hour movie, which is understandable. But I read this book and it was just so good, way better than I was expecting. I was expecting it to be really good, but it was better than that even. And so just overall, fantastic book. And I think I will leave it at that. So those are 10 of the science fiction books that I have read so far that have just really left an impact on me. There's other science fiction books that I have read, and I just decided not to include on this list. It's not a top 10 list. They're just 10 of my favorite sci-fi books I've read so far. So thank you guys for watching an Erudite Adventure. This is kind of a very different video than I've ever done before. Not exactly, I guess, because I did the Arthurian literature one, but it's kind of a video that I don't do as often, and it was a very good one for me to get out. As soon as I came up with this idea, I was like, I've got to do this idea. This is a perfect idea for me, for my channel. And so I decided to do it. I went and wrote down these books or series, depending on some of them, and it works. In my opinion, it works as a way to get some thoughts on science fiction out, because I've talked so much about fantasy on this channel and I haven't read that much science fiction. So it's a good way to kind of condense my thoughts into one video rather than have to slowly start building them up over the course of however long, over the course of the next 2.5 years. So anyways, thank you guys for watching Erudite Adventure. We post videos every Monday and Thursday. We have our social medias linked in the description down below. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. We will see you guys again soon. Stay warm.